My mom looked straight at me across the dinner table, gave a small laugh, and said, "You'll never be as good as your brother." She said it casually, like it was a harmless joke, like it was something everyone in the room already knew. And they laughed. My dad smiled into his plate. My aunt shook her head, like it was just one of those family truths you're supposed to accept quietly. I didn't laugh, because what none of them knew, what none of them ever bothered to ask, was that for years I had been paying their bills in silence. Not once, not in an emergency, but month after month, transfer after transfer, problem after problem. I was the reason the lights stayed on, the reason their internet didn't get shut off, the reason my brother could keep pretending he was the golden success story everyone applauded. And that night, when my mom said I'd never measure up to him, something inside me finally snapped. I pushed my chair back and said, "Fine. Then tell him to cover everything from now on, because I'm done sending money." The room went completely silent. My mom blinked, frowned, and said something that almost made me question my own memory. "What money?" she asked. "We've never received a single dollar from you." She said it with so much confidence, so much certainty, that for a second, I wondered if I had imagined everything. But I hadn't, because I work with numbers for a living, and I keep records. Every transfer, every bill, every late-night favor disguised as just helping family. I had all of it, printed, organized, waiting. And when I finally laid those receipts on the table, the story my family had been telling for years completely fell apart. If you've ever been the responsible one, the dependable one, the one nobody worries about until they need something, you'll want to hear what happened next. And before we go any further, if stories about family betrayal, quiet sacrifices, and karma that comes without shouting resonate with you, make sure you subscribe to the channel. That way, even if you get busy, you won't miss the stories that stay with you long after the video ends. Because what happened after those receipts came out didn't just change one dinner. It changed who paid the price, who kept their image, and who finally stopped funding someone else's version of the truth. And the most surprising part, the real consequences didn't start that night. They started when the money stopped. My name is Emily Parker. I'm 34 years old, and for most of my adult life, I've been known in my family as the responsible one. Not the fun one, not the exciting one, just the one they never had to worry about. I live about 2 hours away from my parents' house in a quiet town outside Columbus, Ohio. I work a steady office job, nothing flashy, nothing that gets talked about at family gatherings. But it pays the bills. It keeps the lights on. It gives me health insurance and a little peace of mind. In my family that made me invisible in the best and worst way, my older brother Ryan was the opposite. Loud, charismatic, always working on something big. Real estate one year, online coaching the next, some new business idea every Thanksgiving. He had stories. He had confidence. He had a way of making every room lean toward him when he talked, and my parents loved that. At family dinners, conversations naturally bent in his direction, like gravity. Ryan would talk about deals that were about to close, clients who were this close to signing opportunities that were huge, but just needed a little more time. My mom would nod proudly. My dad would clap him on the shoulder and say things like, "That's my boy, always hustling." When someone asked about me, the answers were short and tidy. "Emily's fine. She has a good job. She's very responsible." That was it. No follow-up questions, no curiosity, no concern. Being fine meant I didn't need anything. And being responsible meant I could handle whatever came my way. I showed up on time. I brought food when I was supposed to. I remembered birthdays, appointments, passwords. If my dad couldn't log into an account, he called me. If my mom's phone stopped syncing with the TV, she waited for me to visit. If something needed to be filled out online, signed, paid, or fixed, it quietly landed on my plate. Nobody ever asked if I was tired, or stretched thin, or overwhelmed, because I never made a fuss. At dinners, I usually sat toward the end of the table, listening, refilling water glasses, clearing plates, smiling at the right moments while Ryan talked about his life like it was a highlight reel. Sometimes my mom would look at me and say, "You're such a help, Emily. We don't know what we'd do without you." And she meant it, but not in the way people think. In my family, being helpful wasn't something you were thanked for. It was something you were expected to keep doing. I didn't notice when it became my role. There was no announcement, no conversation. It just happened slowly, one small favor at a time, until it felt normal. If Ryan was late, it was charming. If I was late, it was noticed. If Ryan forgot something, people laughed it off. If I forgot something, it was quietly added to the list of reasons I was usually so on top of things. At some point, responsible stopped feeling like a compliment. It started feeling like a job title I never applied for, the kind where the workload grows, but the recognition disappears. I told myself this was just how families worked, that every family had roles, that mine just happened to be the dependable one. I didn't realize yet that the more dependable I became, the easier it was for everyone else to lean back. And I definitely didn't realize that my silence was teaching them something dangerous. It was teaching them that I would always catch them before they fell. And once people believe that, they stop looking at the ground. The first time my parents asked me for money, it didn't feel like a big deal. It was a phone call from my dad late one evening. His voice sounded tired, a little embarrassed. He told me there had been an unexpected expense, something with the house, a repair that couldn't wait. "Could you spot us a little?" he asked. "Just this once. We'll pay you back." I remember sitting on the edge of my bed, phone pressed to my ear, looking at my own bank app. I didn't have much back then. I was still early in my career, still counting every dollar. But I said yes without hesitation, because that's what responsible people do, and that's what daughters do. At least that's what I believed at the time. The payback never came, but I didn't bring it up. A few months later, there was another call. This time, it was my mom. The utility bill had gone up. Prices were crazy. She sounded stressed, kept apologizing, kept saying she hated to ask. "It's just for this month," she said. "We'll get back on track soon." I sent the money. Then it happened again, and again. At first, the amounts were small enough that I didn't think twice. $50 here, $75 there. A quick transfer so the phone wouldn't get shut off. A grocery run when my mom said prices were killing them. Every request came wrapped in the same language. "Just this once. Just until things settle down. You know how it is." And I did know how it was. Or at least, I thought I did. What I didn't realize was that each "just this once" was quietly becoming an expectation. Eventually, my mom asked if it would be easier if I just covered a few bills directly. That way, she wouldn't have to keep asking. "It would help us sleep better," she said. "And you're so good with this stuff." So I set up automatic payments. Electric, water, internet. Nothing dramatic, just enough to help out. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself this was what family did when one person was more stable than the others. Meanwhile, Ryan's life kept rolling along the way it always had. He talked about his next big opportunity, his next breakthrough, his next plan. Sometimes he'd call me directly. "Hey, Em," quick favor he'd say. Like we were talking about borrowing a charger. "Things are a little tight this month. Can you float me a couple $100? I'll flip it back as soon as this deal closes." The deal was always about to close, and the money never came back. My parents never framed it as Ryan needing help. They framed it as investing in his potential. "He just needs a little runway," my mom would say. "He's going to do great things." And somehow I became part of that runway. The strange thing is, nobody ever sat me down and said, "Emily, you're supporting this family." They didn't have to. It was all implied. I adjusted my life around their needs without even realizing I was doing it. I stayed in a cheaper apartment longer than I wanted to. I skipped trips with friends. I delayed replacing things I needed because there was always some other bill that felt more urgent. When money left my account, it barely registered as a loss. It felt like maintenance, like something I was supposed to do to keep everything running smoothly. And the more I helped, the quieter it all became. Nobody mentioned the money at family dinners. Nobody thanked me. Nobody acknowledged it at all. Instead, they talked about how well Ryan was doing, how hard he worked, how proud they were of him. If someone asked how my parents were managing, my mom would smile and say, "Ryan's been such a blessing. He really takes care of us." I would sit there listening, knowing the automatic transfer scheduled for the first of the month had my name on it. But I stayed quiet because correcting the story felt uncomfortable, and because I didn't want to sound bitter, and because part of me believed that being needed was the same thing as being valued. What I didn't see yet was the pattern forming. The more I gave, the less visible it became. The quieter my contributions, the louder everyone else's assumptions grew. And slowly, without anyone ever saying it out loud, my role shifted from helper to safety net. The kind people fall back on without looking. The night everything finally came to the surface didn't feel special at first. It was just another family dinner, another weekend, another table filled with the same voices and the same stories. I drove down to my parents' house after work, the way I had done so many times before. I brought a container of cookies because my mom liked them, and because showing up empty-handed always made me feel uneasy, like I was breaking some unspoken rule. When I walked in, Ryan was already there, leaning against the counter, phone in hand, talking loudly about a listing that had almost closed. My mom hovered nearby, smiling. My dad nodded along. I slipped into my usual spot near the end of the table and listened. Ryan talked. Everyone reacted. They asked questions. They laughed at the right moments. They leaned in. At one point, my dad raised his glass and said, "You know, we're really proud of you, son. You're always making things happen." My mom reached over and squeezed Ryan's arm. "You've always had something special," she said. "Some people just do." Then she looked at me. It wasn't a harsh look. It wasn't angry. It was casual, almost thoughtful. And that's what made it hurt more. "You know, Emily," she said, "you'll never be as good as your brother." The table went quiet for a beat. Then someone chuckled, not because it was funny, but because it was easier than questioning it. I felt my chest tighten, the way it does when you hear something you've always known, but hoped was wrong. I tried to smile. I tried to let it pass, but something in me finally pushed back. "What does that mean?" I asked. My mom waved her hand like I was making a big deal out of nothing. "Oh, you know," she said. "He's a go-getter. He has drive. You're steady. You're fine." Fine. That word again. "I've been helping a lot," I said, keeping my voice calm. "More than anyone seems to notice." My dad frowned slightly. Ryan shifted in his chair. My mom sighed. "Emily, you're too sensitive," she said. "We all help each other. That's just family." "I'm not talking about help," I said. "I'm talking about money." That's when the tone changed. My mom's smile tightened. My dad leaned back in his chair. "What money?" my mom asked. The question hit me harder than her original comment. "What do you mean, what money?" I said. "The bills, the transfers, the stuff I cover every month." She shook her head slowly. "Emily, we've never asked you for that much," she said. "You're exaggerating." Ryan laughed softly, like he was trying to lighten the mood. "Come on," he said. "You make it sound like you're supporting the whole family." I looked around the table, waiting for someone to back me up. No one did. My dad cleared his throat. Nobody forced you to send anything he said. You chose to help. That doesn't mean we owe you something. I felt the ground shift under me. I'm not saying you owe me, I said. I'm saying you can't pretend it didn't happen. My mom's voice sharpened. You're acting like we're using you, she said. That's really unfair. Unfair. That word landed differently, because in that moment, I realized something important. They weren't confused. They weren't forgetful. They were rewriting the story in real time. Everything I had given was being reframed as small, optional, insignificant. And when I pushed back, I became the problem. Ryan shook his head. This is weird, Em, he said. Keeping track of stuff like that. Families don't do that. My mom nodded. Exactly, she said. Families don't keep score. I sat there listening and felt a strange calm settle over me. Because if they truly believed none of it mattered, then proving it wasn't going to be about feelings. It was going to be about facts. I didn't argue anymore that night. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't push the point. I finished my dinner, helped clear the table, drove home in silence. But when I got back to my apartment, I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't scroll. I didn't distract myself. I opened my laptop, and for the first time, I stopped asking myself whether I was overreacting. I decided to check the numbers, because if my family was going to pretend the truth didn't exist, I was going to make it impossible to ignore. I didn't open my laptop that night to prove anything to them. At first, I just needed to know I wasn't losing my mind. I logged into my bank account and scrolled back through the months. Then the years. I filtered by my parents' names, by the notes I'd written in the memo lines. Utilities, internet, insurance, groceries, Ryan. The screen filled up faster than I expected. Row after row of transfers. Small amounts, medium amounts. Some I barely remembered sending. Others I remembered very clearly, because they had come at moments when my own account felt painfully tight. I exported everything into a spreadsheet, the way I do at work when something needs to be clear. Dates, amounts, notes, no emotion, just facts. When I added it all up, I stared at the number for a long time. It was more than I wanted to admit, more than I had ever said out loud, enough to change my own life if it had stayed where it belonged. And that was just what I could track cleanly. It didn't include the cash I'd slipped into my mom's hand at the grocery store, or the times I filled my dad's gas tank without saying anything, or the little purchases that never made it into a memo line. I didn't cry. I felt steady, the kind of steady you feel when something finally makes sense. The next day, I printed everything, not dramatically, not angrily, just page after page, hole punched and organized by year. I slipped it all into a simple black binder. On the front, I wrote one word: family. When Sunday came, my mom had texted that morning, saying they wanted to talk about finances. Just a small family meeting. Nothing serious. I drove over with the binder sitting on the passenger seat like a quiet witness. When I walked into the house, the table was already cleared. My dad had his laptop open. My mom was pacing. Ryan leaned back in his chair, scrolling on his phone, like none of this involved him. I set my purse down. Then I placed the binder in the middle of the table. My dad started talking first. Things are getting tight, he said. We just want to make a plan. Make sure everyone is contributing. My mom jumped in. Ryan's been doing so much already, she said quickly. And you're in a good place, Emily. You understand responsibility. I waited until they finished. Then I slid the binder toward them. Before we make a plan, I said I need everyone to see what I've already been contributing. My mom frowned. What is that? She asked. I opened the binder to the first page. A summary. Totals by year. A grand total at the bottom in bold. She leaned forward to read it. I watched the color drain from her face. For a second, no one spoke. Then she laughed, sharp, nervous. This is ridiculous, she said. You're making it look bigger than it is. My dad leaned in, squinting. Emily, he said, this doesn't mean anything. It's just family helping family. I flipped to the next page. Monthly breakdowns, utilities, insurance, groceries, transfers to Ryan. March, April, May. Same pattern. My mom closed the binder with a snap. We don't need to see every little thing you've ever done, she said. These were gifts. Ryan finally looked up from his phone. Wow, he said. You've been keeping score. That's weird. Something inside me clicked into place. I stood up slowly. If this is all so small, I said, then it won't be a problem for Ryan to take over. Everyone looked at me. Take over what my mom asked. All of it, I said. The power, the water, the internet, the insurance, the groceries, the emergencies, everything I've been covering. My dad stared at me like I'd said something inappropriate. That's not how families work, he said. My mom shook her head. What money, Emily? She said again. We've never received anything from you. I opened the binder and pushed it back toward her. Every dollar is right there, I said. You don't get to erase it because it makes you uncomfortable. My mom pushed the binder away like it burned. You're being dramatic, she snapped. You never said you expected anything back. I didn't, I said. I expected respect. The room went silent. I picked up the binder and held it against my chest. I'm not your bank, I said. I'm your daughter, and I'm done paying to be treated like I don't matter. I didn't wait for permission. I grabbed my purse and walked out. And for the first time in years, I drove home without planning how to fix their problems. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. That was just when the real fallout began. I didn't even make it halfway home before my phone started buzzing. Calls, voicemails, texts stacking up so fast the screen felt crowded. I didn't answer any of them. When I finally parked outside my apartment, I sat in the car for a long moment, hands resting on the steering wheel, listening to the engine tick as it cooled. I felt shaky, not proud, not angry, just empty. I went inside and listened to the voicemails in order. My mom was first. Her voice was tight, offended. How could you embarrass us like that, she said. You made it sound like we're using you. We're your parents. The next message came minutes later, sharper. If you wanted appreciation, you could have just said something. You didn't need to wave papers around like a lawyer. This isn't a courtroom. This is family. Then my dad? Disappointed, controlled. Nobody forced you to help Emily, he said. You chose to. That doesn't make it a debt. Ryan's message was the shortest. What is wrong with you, he said. Who keeps records like that? It's a couple $1,000s. Get over it. I deleted that one before it finished. Over the next few days, the tone shifted. First came anger, then guilt, then denial. My mom texted that I must have added things wrong, that it couldn't have been that much, that I was stressed and seeing things through a negative lens. My dad emailed me a list of things they had paid for when I was younger. School clothes, a used car years ago. He ended it with, maybe we should all stop putting price tags on family. I read it once and closed the email. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I did something much quieter. I logged into my bank account and canceled every automatic payment tied to their names. Electric, water, internet, insurance, gone. Then I set up a new automatic transfer. The same amount I'd been sending them each month. This time, it went into a savings account, labeled simply, Emily. The fallout didn't stop right away. My mom posted vague messages online about ungrateful children. Ryan shared motivational quotes about hustling and self-reliance. A week later, my dad accidentally sent me a photo of an internet shutoff notice before following it with sorry, wrong person. Another time my mom called crying about the power company. In the past, I would have logged in and fixed it without thinking. This time, I said, I'm sorry you're dealing with that. Have you called them to set up a payment plan? The silence on the other end of the line was heavy. Ryan texted me one night asking for a few $100s to lock in a deal. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I replied, "I'm not sending money anymore." He sent back an eye roll emoji and said, "Guess the receipts changed you." Maybe they did, because something else was changing too. My parents adjusted, not dramatically, not gracefully, but they adjusted. My dad picked up a weekend maintenance job. My mom started working a few shifts a week at the local library. Ryan stopped posting flashy nights out. He talked less about big opportunities and more about how slow things were. At family dinners, the tone shifted. No one joked about me being fine anymore. No one called Ryan the man of the house. Bills came up carefully, if at all. And when they did, everyone looked somewhere else. On my side, life got quieter. The money that used to disappear stayed put. My savings grew. Slowly, steadily. I signed up for a gym membership. I booked a trip I'd been putting off for years. I started thinking about my future, like it actually belonged to me. The guilt didn't vanish overnight. There were nights I lay awake, wondering if I was selfish, if I'd gone too far, if love really did mean sacrificing until there was nothing left. But then, I'd remember sitting at that table, being told I'd never be as good as my brother, while my money paid for the lights above our heads. And I understood something I wish I'd learned sooner. Loving your family doesn't mean funding their denial. Being responsible doesn't mean being invisible. I still see them. I still answer the phone. But I don't pay for someone else's comfort at the cost of my own worth anymore. And that turned out to be the real change. Not the binder, not the argument, but the moment I stopped catching everyone before they fell and let them learn how to stand on their own. As someone who has spent years studying family dynamics boundaries and the quiet damage caused by unspoken expectations, I want to pause here and talk about what really happened in this story. This was never just about money. Money was simply the language the problem finally spoke in. What Emily experienced is something I see often, especially in families, with one responsible child and one golden child. Over time, responsibility gets mistaken for capacity. Silence gets mistaken for consent, and help slowly turns into obligation. When that happens, the family doesn't fall apart all at once. It drifts, roles harden, stories get repeated until they sound like truth. Emily didn't break her family by setting a boundary. The family was already broken in a quieter way, one where gratitude was optional, accountability was avoided, and love came with invoices no one wanted to admit existed. What changed everything wasn't the binder of receipts. It was the moment Emily stopped participating in a story that erased her. That's an important distinction. Healthy families can survive boundaries. Unhealthy systems depend on you never setting one. And here's the part many people struggle with. Emily didn't cut her family off. She didn't seek revenge. She didn't demand apologies that might never come. She simply stopped paying for a version of the truth that required her to stay small. That's not cruelty. That's clarity. If you're listening to this and recognizing yourself maybe as the dependable one, the fixer, the person everyone leans on but rarely thanks, I want you to ask yourself something gently. What would change if you stopped rescuing and started choosing? Not out of anger, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. Boundaries don't destroy love. They reveal where love is real. And sometimes, the most healing thing you can do for yourself and your family is to let discomfort do the teaching instead of your silence. If this story resonated with you, if it made you pause or reflect on your own experiences, take a moment to like this video. It helps these stories reach others who might need them just as much. And if you want to continue exploring stories about family boundaries, quiet strength, and the kind of karma that doesn't shout but always arrives, consider subscribing to the channel. These stories aren't just entertainment. They're mirrors, and sometimes seeing yourself clearly for the first time is where real healing begins.